So welcome everyone to this third event that I've been a host of. My name is Richard Andrew. I have got Dr. Nick Jackson, who is from the UK, but he's the leader of digital technologies at Scotch College, Adelaide. Adelaide happens to be my home city as well, so there's a little connection there. And so Nick now works alongside the Scotch teachers, guiding them in the clever uses of ChatGPT and other AI. So Nick was actually a guest for the first session that we ran and had an emergency come up and couldn't make it. So I've been keen to get him back. I know I could get Nick talking on all sorts of things related to AI and ChatGPT, but in this session, we want to keep it pretty focused on the practicalities of, the issues and assessment types that we can use in our classrooms. So just say a quick hi, Nick.
Hello there.
So as I said, I want to keep this as practical as possible. Some of the questions we'll look at is how do we have students use ChatGPT in an active way rather than a passive way? How can we avoid students from, let's use the word cheating? How can we prevent that? And what are some practical ways ChatGPT and other AI can be integrated into learning that alleviates the fears of educators? So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I will start off with this long dump that I've done in the chat. There's some links. So first of all, Nick has got a free, is it still free?
Yeah, still free.
Yep.
Always free.
A free course called AI Chatbots and ChatGPT for Teachers. I've done this myself. It took me a couple of hours to do it on a light level, and I've taken some deeper dives since. It's fantastic. So there's a link there. There's and then the other two events that I've hosted. There's the timestamp replays. They are in the form of articles. So there's two links to those. My work is I run professional development for teachers, mostly in mathematics, but not only. So I've got the Courses Academy. That's the link down the bottom there if you're interested. So if you want to copy and paste that into a Word doc, that would be a good idea. So I thought before we get into the real nitty-gritty, just a few questions for Nick. So how long have you been interested in this field? The AI
well, if we're
field?
talking about the AI field, if you talk about it in terms of technology integration and technology, all my teaching career basically. So year 2000 is when I came into teaching. So I was one of the few people who wasn't interested in going into the IT field to make money out of the impending Y2K disaster that was about to engulf the whole world and then never did. But I was a rarity. I was one of those people with qualifications in IT who didn't want to make money out of that, but actually wanted to go into teaching. And so there I was. So I was in the UK at the time and quite a rare commodity.
Right.
So yeah, we're talking Y2K 23 years ago. It makes me feel old. But there we go. So back then, always an interest in technology and how it can change people's lives, how it can improve people's lives, how we can use technology to facilitate our ideas, to experiment with, to improve our living conditions and improve the way we educate ourselves, the way we teach, the way we learn. So quickly within teaching, believe it or not, I became a leader within my first year of teaching. So I've actually not been a normal teacher very long. So I don't understand having a full timetable. Sorry to tell you all the teachers out there, but I really don't, because I've never really had one. Because in the first year of teaching in the UK, I assume it's still the same now, you don't get a full load in the first year, and then became a leader, so never have had a full load. So I've never actually been a normal teacher for very long.
Okay.
So if you talk about AI though specifically, I suppose about 4 years ago, started looking at in terms of it being part of the digital technologies curriculum in Australia, but also playing around with those tools myself and starting to think about, what's really going to happen here when these start to become ubiquitous and start to become more powerful and start to have more general uses. Then you start seeing some of the robotic concepts developing and how that's happening, and then the AI components within that. Then we start seeing those things that start to happen with mobile technologies such as Siri, And also with those technologies, we start to see in the home that we can talk to, those kinds of things. And you start to think about, oh, what happens when these are actually able to respond intelligently to you? So really, I suppose the last 4 or 5 years, I would say, started to grow an interest in that, and then started to see research happening around me in that field, and also use cases as well. You know, people starting to have experiences where in education that outside of just digital technologies curriculum, especially with some of the universities around here that are playing in this field, particularly University of South Australia has got a big interest in artificial intelligence and also data analytics and those kinds of areas. Yes, they started doing hookups with schools. So yeah, 4 to 5 years. I hope that gives you a general enough view of this. But the reality is that the whole game changed at the end of last year.
Yes,
the whole game changed.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily about advances in AI technology. That was as George Siemens likes to describe it, the pulling back of the curtain. I'm not sure I quite agree with that in respect of what actually happened there, because I believe that, to me, when ChatGPT was launched into the wide world, it was more than a pulling back of curtain. It was about the interface. It was about the way we could interact with this technology suddenly, and that changed it for a lot of people.
Cool. So can we now jump, because you're rubbing shoulders with teachers and you're helping them to integrate AI into their daily life. And if we can focus on, because I know there's other ways that AI can help teachers, but if we stick to teaching and learning and assessment, what have been some of your teachers' main concerns regarding ChatGPT and other AI, and especially in regard to assessment?
Well, when you first show them the power of this technology, or they find it for themselves by watching online content, or maybe they see kids doing things with these tools, then you get that moment when teachers will quickly understand that this technology, or many of these technologies, can be used to plagiarize. So you immediately get this, well, what's that going to mean for me? And I think for a lot of teachers, that there is a shocking moment. It's a shocking moment in terms of understanding the power of this, because it's power like we've not seen before. And I think that you quickly get a sense of fear, a sense of, what is this going to mean for my assessment practices? What does this mean in terms of how I should react to this? So perhaps it's a lot of fear. It's a fear in terms of maybe workload pressures. It's fear in terms of how am I supposed to adjust my practice to deal with this, or adjust my assessments that I've created. But I think it's also as well in terms of discomfort. You know, what does this mean for my skills, my knowledge, in terms of being able to deal with this? So it's quite unusual in terms of advancements in technology to have such a huge leap in what we're seeing here in terms of the threats to assessments, to current assessment practices that go on in the.
Is there also a concern? You know, I totally get how smashed teachers are for time. And is it also a bit of a like, oh my God, how am I going to get my head around? Like, where am I going to find the time to play with all this? And is that partly an issue as well?
I think time, you mentioned time in there, definitely time. I'm not sure it's to get my head around it. I think that depends on the teacher. I'm seeing different reactions, but I would say for a large portion of teacher, it's just another thing, or they think it's just another thing. And I do believe there's a certain discourse out there that some teachers are thinking that this will go away, or that plagiarism checkers will advance so much that Turnitin or whatever else out there will deal with this.
Can you talk a little bit about that idea that, oh, well, I'm sure within a few weeks we'll have a plagiarism checker and it'll be fine. We can just run it through that and we'll be sweet.
Yeah. Without wishing to be too blunt, that is completely and utterly ridiculous. If anybody thinks that's going to happen, then you're just living on a different planet, because the stage we're at the moment is the whole game's about to change yet again.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality of having Copilot within Microsoft and what exactly that's going to look like, the idea of having Google's equivalent, the idea of having these tools embedded so you do not actually realize you're using them, and or it becomes the way that you work. So instead of opening your Office document to write your essay, you open your Office document or your Google Doc or whatever doc you work on, and you start with not writing the thing, you start to talk about what you want to write, in other words, in some way of prompting it, and it begins to do it for you.
Yeah.
And that will be a completely normal way of working. Indeed, it already is for some people.
But you would agree, sorry, if I cut you there, you would agree that once the prompts have been given, and maybe multiple times, and whether they're spoken or whether they're written, that then the critical phase is to throw your critical eye over the whole thing and then start to tweak it.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? The big question becomes, if by this means of prompting, and I do believe the way we're prompting at the moment that's completely archaic as well. That will change. So if we get to this point of being able to select things, as you said, talk to things, whatever means we're using to engineer this output, and the output becomes more sophisticated and more reliable, more trustworthy, and also access the internet, and also accesses all other apps, as we're seeing in the current iteration of ChatGPT, then we get to the point of going, so what is the role of assessment? What are we actually producing in output? What becomes the learning, and therefore what are we assessing here? And they are the big fundamental questions that we have to address. If we're talking about a written document, if we're talking about an essay, and we're admitting to the fact that this particular technology or these tools can produce output that we're not writing as such in the traditional way, then what exactly is the learning that's going on? What exactly are we trying to assess in terms of skills and knowledge? And what is the function of the learner, or what are the particular things we're looking for in those assessment pieces going forward?
Right. So let's try and get this in a really feet on the ground way here. So let's say I'm a teacher that you're working with, and I have concerns, and let's say I'm in humanities and I'm talking about essays, and I have, the last few years I have had the milestone kind of things in place, and I do like to see the students have to show me at different stages where they're up to, and we have a quick talk about it. So now I understand how ChatGPT works, and I use it myself in terms of writing. I've tested it and so on and so on. What's your advice to me?
I think we've got to go in stages. And that comes back to your time comment earlier on, and that factor of time. We cannot deny, as you've said a few times today, that teachers are time poor, educators are time poor. Yeah. And we also cannot deny that there are other things going on. You can't just stop the world and go, let's deal with AI. That's not the way life works, is it? We've got a number of things going on. We've got vaping epidemics. We've got well-being epidemics going on in schools. We've got X number of different professional development cycles and whatever else. So the reality is we have to deal with this over a period of time. We can't be instant with this, but there are some things that can instantly happen.
Right.
And then there are things that need to happen in the longer term. So if we look in the short term, things I'm doing with teachers currently, and I advise to happen in any school where you have the opportunities, is to, first of all, let's do an audit. Let's sit and just get a particular assessment, even get kids to do it, stick the assessment into ChatGPT, and let's look at the quality of the output. Because if it can produce some decent output in your assessment's not very good, is it? Let's face it, in terms of where we are right now. And let's stop talking about it in terms of going, in the future. This is now. Let's just plug it into ChatGPT or whatever, or Bing or whatever you're going to use, and let's see what it produces.
So Nick, that's a really good point. So can you give me a specific example of something about an assessment that allows ChatGPT to just go bang, well, there it is, I don't have to do anything with it, and so therefore it's not a very good assessment, quote you.
Yep.
Compared to something that how I can change that assessment, either tweak it or fundamentally change it, so as I've got to do it, the learner has to do a lot more work with ChatGPT to get it out.
And that point you just said, a lot more work is the important thing here. So let's go with, okay, let's do a comparative analysis of The Great Gatsby and something else. Yep. As an assessment piece, as another piece. Let's do it. Yep. I don't even have to read The Great Gatsby or watch the film. I can just stick that into ChatGPT and it can produce me a comparative analysis between that and something else. I can't remember what the thing is. I'm only saying this because we've just done it. I've just done it to give it to a bunch of students. I give a stage 2 assessment that was a comparative analysis with Great Gatsby and something. I can't remember what the other thing was. And the year 7s of this group of students I have, these digital leaders that I've just got together at my school, they actually did this. And I said, completely plagiarize this. Just stick it in and do it in 2 ways. Produce output in 5 minutes that you don't even look at. Just give me the output. And the second one, actually do it and then review what it outputs and try and see if and make it better. And yeah, the results are pretty good. It's a pretty good achievement. And that was stage 2. Stage 2 work here is basically year 12 work. If you're in UK, that'd be A-level work. Yeah. And these were year 7s. And so they have no idea what they're talking about. They've never seen the thing, and it produced the output. So a comparative analysis. Yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it? But the reality is
So is one of the things to add there that the teacher then there's some sort of interview process that goes on?
Could be. That could be one method. So straight away you could go, okay, if they're going to choose to use this, to make that assessment better, one simple tweak would be go, okay, you are going to have a face-to-face interview where you're going to have to talk about this thing, and you're going to have to say why you said this thing here, why you came up with that argument, what are these points you're making here. So even if they did use a chatbot in that output, they're going to have to understand what that output is, and they're going to have to explain why they've chose to have that view and not have other views. And then it starts to pick holes in being an automated answer, doesn't it?
And wouldn't it be obvious that if the teacher really understands the students, wouldn't it be obvious mostly that someone has not written in the same way you can pick it out in the old days with just plagiarism? Shouldn't teachers know kind of how their students write?
Yes, would be my answer to that. But do all teachers teach like that? No. Yeah. So that there becomes really, I think, contextual. So you have to start looking at your classroom practice and your teaching practice. And perhaps for some teachers, that's actually the medium to long term. That's not the short term thing that they can change it in the short term, but it's going to take a while to do, as you say, to be able to know what that student's voice is in their work, and of course, be able to see.
If at the start of the year they're using a chatbot, then you're not going to know anyway. Nick, I think let's dive into some of these assessment types that you've mentioned previously, and unpack some of these. And I'm sure some of the discussion, rather than have these discussions and then get to the assessment type. So, do you want to pick one of those that you want to start with first? So I'll just read them out. There's passion projects, Genius Hour projects, project-based assessment, case studies, panel interviews, simulation-based assessment, and compare and contrast assessment. So it'd be good if we could do a bit of a dive into 3 or 4 of those. What would you like to start with?
Well, I mean, I could start with any of them, but actually the one that I've been most recently fascinated with is a simulation-based assessment, because this involves actually using chatbot technology as part of the assessment. because you can actually get ChatGPT to create a simulation. So if you get it to create a simulation through the prompts, then you're actually using it as part of the assessment.
Now,
So
sorry,
that there,
for everyone's benefit,
yeah.
I'm just going to pop there's a link because Nick added to my notes here to say, see the recent work of blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to put that link in there for you. Can you give me an example? I'm going to act like a very layperson. Can you explain to me what a simulation is in this context?
Yeah, Cam. Well, in that example there, that particular teacher was putting up like a murder mystery type thing. So he's getting it to simulate that idea of here's a murder mystery happening, and then the prompts that are in there, and you'll see it all in the link. It starts to, and he gets it. The prompts are telling ChatGPT to basically provide questions, clues, and then you answer through the scenario. And as he was saying in that link, it took him about 20 minutes to solve the crime. So when you look at that sort of example and you go, okay, then let's think of that in medical terms. So say you were studying something medical and
sorry, Nick, just hold that thought. So can you explain again the difference between a simulation and an essay?
All right. So in that sort of scenario there, say you were asked to write an essay on typical conditions that would cause typical things that would cause a heart attack in patients. Okay. Say you were looking at that. Would that be biology? I don't know. But say you were looking at that in a science subject, yeah, typical causes. Instead of doing that, let's turn it on its head. If you created a simulation where you set ChatGPT up in similar ways to it does in that link in a murder mystery, and you said, I want you to simulate somebody having a heart attack. I want you to simulate being in the environment where you are a doctor and you are questioning, you're trying to find out why this person had this heart attack. Ask me questions,
right,
and then reveal particular evidence along the way based on the answers I give to the questions to get to the solution. In other words, what caused the heart attack?
There's multiple outcomes because the patient can give different answers, and that response that causes different.
I suppose what you're looking at there is you're looking at using a particular tool. You're looking at the sorts of questions that the way the student answers the question, or the way the student questions the chatbot to get the information they require in order to make the diagnosis.
Right.
So the skill there is in what are the questions you have provided as a student. And you'd have to have knowledge there, wouldn't you? You'd have to have prior knowledge as to what are the causes of a heart attack, what are the particular symptoms you're looking at, what are the language you're using, those kinds of things. So you would be showing.
I'm hearing a shift from the writing to, or maybe the thinking up these scenarios within the simulation to getting really good at asking the right prompts, which is just another skill. It's a different skill, whether it's a better skill or that's up for argument. But that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
It is, and I think you could have a criticism of that, a fair enough criticism. Going, I don't think that's at the same level as writing an essay. Okay, so say we had that piece, and then you are going to sit beside somebody and go like, you answered all these questions in this way. Yeah, you use these kinds of prompts, you use this kind of language. Why did you choose to do that? If they are then writing evaluation of what they're doing, and that could be in written form or a face-to-face interview, wow, that's got to be as strong as got to be as strong as an evaluation as what you'd have in an essay. There is an argument out there that there's something to be said for writing an essay, structuring an essay, and I don't doubt there is something in that. But is it something we need to hang on to all the time? Is it that important all the time? Not quite sure.
But if you don't know the structure of writing, how do you know whether what the chatbot has outputted is in a structure that fits the model? I mean,
Interesting. And this, I think, is where we have to start making core decisions within assessment as to sometimes not using a chatbot or sometimes going, that's not an appropriate use. It's like the calculator, non-calculator,
yes,
isn't it? So
exactly.
if we're priding ourselves in being able to do mental arithmetic, then,
People,
perhaps calculator is not appropriate at a particular time.
people, I work with mathematics teachers, and there's, oh, it's the calculators. That argument still comes up. It's not the calculator; it's the way it's being used. If you're a teacher and you're allowing kids to go to the calculator and because they get an answer, that's good enough because it's 30 seconds closer to getting out the door. Well, then you're in trouble. Like the kids have, you know what I mean? The kids have to be inspecting what's coming out. So do you have
to be able to estimate, don't you, maths? You have to be able to estimate. You have to roughly know what the answer is going to be, because then you push the right buttons. That's basically that one, isn't it?
I actually had an interview with an inventor who has developed a calculator where you have to estimate, you have to give an estimation first before it'll give you the answer.
So on that topic there, on that theme there, you can actually get ChatGPT to act like a Socratic. So if you say impersonate a Socratic, it will never give you the answer. It will only lead you for one question after another. And there's another example.
One of my favorite sayings in life is, you don't know what you don't know. And it applies particularly to technology, but I think this is the first time I've thought about it in terms of AI, and within education, it'd be good to have another one of these where we maybe talk about, did you know about this and did you know about that? Because not until you get exposed to it, and as we all know, teachers are so busy, how can they be expected to keep up with it all? And I don't think they have to keep up with it all. I suspect there's a certain amount of panic because, oh my God, I've just started to get my head around this, and now I've read that article with this 20 new AI things come out this week, and I'm losing. I don't think you have to be on top of everything, but you need to be thinking about some fundamental ways to change the assessment so as the focus is on the learning rather than the end result.
I mean, those things there that we just talked about there, probably need some teachers to experiment and go away and play with things. But at a very low level, I'm seeing things right here in my school where teachers are putting ChatGPT on the screen with a bunch of students, putting in prompts for it to output content, and then getting the student to analyze the different generations of that output. So if you go back to the Great Gatsby critical analysis. Yeah, exactly. So why is that not an assessment piece? Because then you're using the tool, but then you go in, the tool's not actually the assessment anymore. I want your discussion or your written piece or whatever you're doing in the classroom to actually be an analysis of those two pieces.
Yep.
Now you could say, well, hang on, then let's play devil's advocate. They could then plagiarize those two pieces by copying and pasting them in. Yeah, they could do. I mean, this begins to go like Russian doll, doesn't it? And then they could do it, and they could do it, and they could do it. But maybe you've got some monitoring technique where you're making sure they don't do that, or maybe you are actually allowing them to do that, and it comes up with a piece, and then you want to analyze that, as I said, the Russian doll thing. But maybe it's the discussion, the panel interview type thing, whatever you're having, that discourse around the output it's generated. And as you said, how good is that? Because you've got different perspectives to look at there.
Like, do you have examples of teachers who are doing panel interviews for the first time as a result of AI, like this year?
No. Well, I actually am, but that's to do with the particular subject that I'm teaching, which suits that purpose. So we have to do what's called progress reviews in a subject called AIF, which is Activating Identity's Future, which is replacing the research project here in South Australia, and that's in pilot at the moment. So the idea of this assessment is that we do progress check-ins along the way, as you would do in sort of a scrum sprint sort of mentality. And then the actual assessment at the end is a review of the work that they have done. So the actual creation of the actual thing they're doing, the project they're doing, and that can be anything as well. It's a passion-based project. They've got to do the thing to talk about it, but you're not actually assessing the thing. You're assessing their capacity to learn along the way. So what have they learned from this? How have they managed time? Those kinds of things.
So is there a rubric for that?
Yes,
Yeah,
there is a rubric.
And they understand the rubric. And so that's like a one-on-one interview chat type situation.
You can have it as an interview, and indeed I've used that process with some students who don't like to write, but students can actually submit evidence for the progress review in any way they like. Right. But I have used panel interviews with a number of students, especially those students, as I say, who don't like to write. Yeah. And I find that really powerful.
And so this can link to, you've got passion projects down there. So a passion project is simply within a sphere of learning, what's something that you're passionate about to explore. I mean, there must be guidelines. Can you give us an example of a passion?
Well, in that particular course I'm talking about, there actually aren't any guidelines whatsoever.
Okay.
Students do absolutely anything they want, and I've got students from designing their dream house to making a guitar to writing an essay about the effects of having a child in the family that has special needs and the effect on the rest of the members of the family. I've got, what else have I got? Somebody looking at somebody creating a course for students to learn about AI. I've got all sorts of different things going on. It's makeup trials, special effects makeup, well, you name it, all sorts of things. So it is about, what are you passionate about? And what's really hard in that, I found, and what's really interesting is when you start to do a course like that, and when you start to look at the assessment around it, you have to start deschooling kids. You have to start going, no, forget, this is not like any other subject you've done before. You can do anything you want. There are no rules as regards you must produce evidence this way. You will be assessed this way. Yes, there is a rubric, but let's not concern ourselves with that right now. Let's worry about, project managing your way through this. How are you going to get to your passion? So yeah, you have to do a lot of that. So if we start to look at those, and I've done those in different years before in project-based learning type environments, when you start to do things like that, whether it's a total open-ended project or, as you said, a project within certain themes, certain confines, it's interesting the effect it has on students. I think primary students are used to this way of working a lot more, but as soon as we get into secondary school, it becomes a lot different. So the assessment methods around that, if you think about it, if every student's doing their own project, I'm not sure that AI is going to be a way they can plagiarize that, really.
They could use AI or ChatGPT, say, to speed up, like to at least get a framework for what they're trying to say. Definitely. And so in the same way that I would use it to improve an article, other than that, there's no way they can use it to, cheat.
Exactly, because then it's not cheating, is it? And that's where we have to get into that discussion as well, as to go, what do we consider to be responsible use of AI? What is cheating? What is not cheating? So if I consider my youngest daughter, who sits there now at school, in her school where there's been no discussion of AI that I know of, maybe there has, but I haven't seen any, and my kids report that they haven't seen any. She sits there with Perplexity as an extension, Chrome extension on her browser. And any struggle she has in understanding concepts and things like that, she just pings it open and she puts in. Wow. And I've taught her to go tell it to explain it to you like a 5-year-old. So explain diddly-do, I don't know, differential equations as you would to a 5-year-old. Bang. Wow. And it gives you a little paragraph of output right there. Is that cheating? Well, it's not. It's just the same as putting your hand up and asking the teacher, isn't it? No. Actually, she sits there doing her homework with anything she doesn't understand. Bing, that's what she'll do. Yeah.
On that point, there's a Bridget here. Can you tell me if you're a Bridget Pierce? I'm just curious. In the event number 2 replay, it's timestamped, so you'll see it in the timestamp. I don't know what time it is, but Bridget gives an example. Bridget Pierce gives an example of, I think she was in an English teachers forum, and someone was leading it and saying, so let's just throw a whole lot of different scenarios, and you tell me whether this would be an acceptable use of ChatGPT. And there was one, there was another one, there was another one. Check out the replay because it was really interesting. There was some really specific kind of humanities English type examples, and she even hit me with them, and I'm going, yeah, I think that, so it's interesting when you do that. So you realize AI is not an on-off switch. That there's so many nuances within it, and I think that's what people need to get their head around.
But I suppose that goes back to that time factor as well, doesn't it? How much time a teacher's got to play, how much time a teacher's got to become confident and trust and see what works and what doesn't work, you know?
Can you give me an example of a teacher who you've worked with? We haven't had this discussion before, so I'm guessing that you're probably going to come up with something. But a teacher who was concerned, and you kind of workshop something with them, and they've come out with an assessment task, or at least they're leading towards an assessment task, tackling it in a different way, allowing the use of AI, and they're kind of happy about the way it's going. I'm putting you on the spot here. I don't know if this.
No, that's fine. There's actually two I'm involved in at the moment. I'm not sure they were concerned. They were perhaps in the dark a bit. They didn't really know what they were playing with. These are teachers that probably haven't even done my course. In fact, I don't think they have, even though, you know, it's there and it's been put around my school. So a languages teacher here, French we were looking at, but also do Chinese as well. So we're actually in the middle of designing a task now, and I've left it with her for right now, where this task is going to use, so we're going to have students go into a particular place using VR headsets. So use VR headsets to go to a particular place, where, say, Paris, for instance, where they're going to have to answer questions with their partner, make notes of what they're seeing, for instance, look for particular locations, that kind of thing.
So they're both seeing the same.
No, one will do it, and the other one will make notes of telling them what they're saying. Then they'll swap over, and then so they'll both have their own set of notes on a particular theme. Might be going and looking at theatre, or it might be looking at the arts, or wherever in Paris. So on a particular theme, they'll use that content. Then they're going to have conversations with using ChatGPT around their theme. So they're going to use the content, and whatever they type in, she wants them to screenshot so she can see the French that they're writing in. And so she can see that, and the way that, because you can get it to answer questions for you. You can go, give me 10 questions on this thing in French, you know, on this particular topic. And you can say what age level you want it at. And so they're going to do that. So that's another component of it around the theme. And then they're going to, we also did some other funkier things where I was using some audio and I was getting it to create, it's really ridiculous. There's a little app called mayk.it. And that creates little raps, and it's just an app on your phone. And I think you can get it on an iPad as well. So part of their homework is they're going to have to go and speak into this. So again, we're in the oral component of a language, and then it creates a little rap on what you say. It's completely and utterly silly, but you know, it gives that fun element to it. So I've created one where it's me. I think my wife would think I was trying to do some sexy French voice, where I was speaking French, and then it had the music in the background, and yeah, it's completely ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, yeah, how fun is that? And these are year 9 she's going to do this with. So you've got a speaking component, you've got written component in terms of them typing in answers to these questions or questioning whichever way around they're going to do it. And then you've got these whole note takings, which they can then form an assessment from based on their sort of immersive experience in there. And then you can evaluate that at the end. So that's as far as we've got with that one. So there's a quite fun idea of an assessment piece, a project where you bring in artificial intelligence and other technologies together, and you're creating this whole, you know, engaging project that immerses the students and gets them to create this multimodal, you know, multi-tool, multi-use of tools in one project. Yeah.
Let's say I'm in a school, I'm up for the challenge, but we don't have VR headsets and so on. So it's and you pick whatever subject I'm in, or maybe I should give you some idea, or I don't know, call it humanities of some description. And I'm just looking for some ideas. You know, did you have an example of someone you've worked with on that front that like, because someone might be hearing that and think that sounds fantastic, but we don't have the VR headsets. Like, what's another idea?
I mean, you wouldn't need the VR headsets to do the immersion, you could just get it on Google Maps and go into Street View and do a similar thing. You just don't have it. It's not as immersive, you know. So you can do it with Street View and that. But if you're thinking about, yes, one of the projects, I've got a teacher here on the digital technologies team who's going to use the Hello History app to get a conversations going with historical figures. I don't know which part of history he's doing, and that's going to be part of a project where they've got to show that they're questioning the questions they ask this historical figure. They'll be looked at in terms of they should be talking about particular events in history which are relevant for that person to answer with. So if you're talking about Caesar, you wouldn't be talking about World War II, would you, if you were having a conversation with Caesar? Because obviously Caesar wouldn't know anything about World War II, just in case you didn't know that. But so, or maybe he didn't, I don't know, time traveling. But yeah, so that's part of a project there. So there's a little history app. Again, that's an engagement thing. Is it an amazing use of AI technology? No, but it brings engagement. It brings that assessment idea. And this is the point of this conversation: is when do we stop talking about cheating and when do we start talking about what this actually brings to us? Because one's a negative and one's a positive, isn't it?
Yes.
And the reality is, as has been said many times, is we've got kids here and at other schools as everywhere that can access a tutor that can do their work for them, and they are easy to come by.
Well,
so what's the difference?
Back in the early noughties, I had a kid who would come in. Actually, he didn't do it in my subject because I was maths, but he would go, "Oh yeah, Mum got another B for my English assessment." And he was quite open about it. Quite, you know, he just thought it was a joke. Mum, and he wouldn't be. It wasn't lying. He just, you know.
No.
So this has been going on for 8, and then I'll tell you what AI is going to rip the guts out of, and that is the industry that is, I'll write your university essay for you for however much money I charge. You know, I think that's quite a thing that's been going on for years.
Definitely.
So
yeah, so the use cases I'm sort of bringing to you today, or citing examples of, are the ones where we're progressing away from this rhetoric about the negatives and we're moving towards how can we embrace this? And as I'm showing you there, that's not a teacher who is necessarily that confident or necessarily that skilled. But I suppose the argument then is that you will have some people who are watching this video go, yeah, but who do I work with in my school who's going to do that work with me? You know, and there's something that schools need to think of, because if we're going to change assessment practices, a teacher's skilled and knowledgeable enough to be able to do that within the school if they don't have someone in a position like mine. Yes. And a lot of schools do not have that person. So I think that's where they're sharing, they're looking online. But again, that comes back to time. It happens, is it going to be powerful in this sort of area, and looking at examples that are out there. And there are many examples out there already. You know? Do
you sense, I mean, one of my big mantras is student agency. I just think it's so important to have kids who want to learn and who are taking ownership over their learning. And in order for that to happen, the teacher needs to veer away from certain modes of teaching, old school, into modes that promote responsibility taking, a sense of choice, a sense of control over the learning. And clearly, AI opens up the door for students to take more control over what's going on, even though, well, that's the potential, unless they're just dumping something into ChatGPT-4 and taking whatever it spits out and handing it in. So it's almost like it magnifies those extremes, because the scope for really a kid who getting their hands dirty with this technology and really molding a piece of work and showing the stages and so on, I think is pretty awesome. In your school, do you sense there's, I don't even know how to ask this question. Do you sense that with some teachers they are thinking, oh, okay, I am now handing over more control to my kids, but within a tight structure, like that they are stepping out into that land of agency a bit more?
Yeah, well, another example I was going to give you, in another teacher I'm working with, again, somebody who's she's not afraid of technology in any way, but she's not played with it. She's not somebody who's coming and having conversations about AI with me. She's got other things that we talk about, but not really that. And I'm doing a project with her. This is year 7 English, where it was the classic of what are your interests, passions, hobbies. The kids would typically have brought in photos for that, and then they would write about the things that they're interested in. I don't know what format that was in, maybe an essay, I don't know, something like that. And then they would do an evaluation. I'm not sure what the evaluation was about in the classic. I never really saw the classic. She just described what it used to be like. So now what we're doing is they're going to, they're still going to bring the photos, maybe videos as well, but largely photos. I'm going to show them a suite I'm going to show them all sorts of AI tools like talking avatars. I'm going to show them text to voice that you can do. I'm going to show them again that Make It app, that stupid song thing, things like that, all sorts of things like that they can use. And then I'm going to I've already done some intros to some video editing software that we use. So they're going to have to mash all these things together in 1 2-minute video. And then the work becomes about looking at their skills in terms of being able to create a media piece. And then they're going to have to do the written evaluation about their media piece. And I don't think that AI is quite at a stage of being able to watch their video and come out with that evaluation. So they are looking at, again, so we're using AI in the assessment here, and they can choose whatever tools they want to use. I'll show them some and I'll go, here's Futurepedia, go and look at some other ones as well. I'm just giving you examples here. And then they'll put it all together in a video, but the video's got to be look at, how you make that flow through from their own pictures
there's
to
a lot of skills.
AI. Yeah, a lot of skills. And it'll be interesting to see. Some of these kids may struggle with that, and some of the kids I think will go absolutely crazy. It'll look insane, And then the evaluation at the end, it comes down to, so why did you choose to do it like that? Why did you use that particular tool? Why did you have a talking avatar at the beginning and the end? Why did you, this bit, those kinds of things? Yeah. So how powerful is that?
Fantastic. Nick, can you give us an example of a case study assessment?
A case study assessment. Oh, in terms of looking at a particular case and analyzing that? Yeah, I mean, when we look at that kind of assessment, that really starts to get into the idea of being able to go, here's a particular thing that's happened. I want you to critically analyze what's going on there. Now, that's not to say that kind of assessment can't be done by a chatbot. It can be plagiarized in certain ways. It's certainly not infallible in terms of that. But I think once we start looking at particular case studies and we start looking at the nuances within it, that starts to be pushed beyond a lot of what AI can do. So if you start to get into intricacies of what happened in a particular situation, especially if it's very current, right now, ChatGPT wouldn't be able to do that. However, there is the impending situation, and also using Bing, you could use current things. But a case study and the nuances around it, I think, starts to push it a bit further than what it can do.
So do you have any teachers who have done case study projects?
Not any in this school. I haven't seen any in this school. I've seen some previously, but no, I haven't seen any situations right now where case studies we're starting to use. But I do think there's power in that. And I've seen some things online about that. Yeah.
And what's a Genius Hour project?
Okay, so Genius Hour project is very much like a passion-based project, but the idea is that there's a certain time set aside within a working week, or it could be 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week, that kind of thing. So it's the similar sort of concept where the idea is you're going, okay, we're going to drop everything else and you're going to concentrate on that project. So it's like an ongoing project. That's what that idea comes from.
Okay. And so the Genius Hour is like, okay, now it's time for Genius Hour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And compare and contrast assessment. Can you give us an example within a particular subject that might have been used? And you've got a link here. You've actually got 2 links here. I'll drop this in the chat as well. You can look at the output as chatbot shown by Steve.
I'm trying to remember what links I gave you. Did I give you a couple of links to them?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I'm just dropping them in there now. So if you people want to grab those and put them in a Word doc or something, that would be, then you can have
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the work of Steve Brophy, and he's done some amazing work on that. And that goes back to that thing I was talking about before, where if you use ChatGPT to come up with answers or come up with, particular output on a given prompt or given text or whatever you're asking it to do, then you can start to compare and contrast the two outputs it gives you. So that's back to
I
that.
see.
Yes. Yeah. So
Oh,
you can
okay.
use them to actually do that. Yeah.
Well, you could use that anywhere.
Exactly. In any sort of work, because especially with the regenerate response button, it's going to come up with a different answer. And indeed, also you can do comparatives between different versions of ChatGPT, because 4 will give you a different answer than 3.5.
So the question there though is, can ChatGPT answer that effectively, like their own, compare and contrast these two outputs of yours?
Yeah, and there's an interesting point that I've just heard today. One of the students was telling me that a teacher had said to them that they can tell whether the work is being generated by ChatGPT by feeding it back into ChatGPT and going, "Did you write this?" Not sure. I haven't tested that, whether that's completely correct. But I would say this: if I know you're going to do that as a teacher, I will just take it out of ChatGPT, feed it through another tool, and then it will regenerate in a different way and then hand it in, because that's not going to be ChatGPT's content. So it's a fight in a losing battle, is that, isn't it? I have heard the one where you get ChatGPT's content, you get the output, and then you feed it into Quillbot and it completely rewrites it, and then you hand that in. So yeah, it's a losing battle, that is. Deficit model.
Yeah. But again, see, I know this doesn't solve everything completely, but if a kid wants to just cheat and get into university and know nothing, well, then knock yourself out. But you're going to be of no use to anybody, including yourself. And that's kind of like an attitude we need to have, I think, with our kids, and to refocus and to have that conversation. Like, what are we doing here? Like, let's learn how to use this productively. And if the kids, I am confident that for most students, if it's done well and students are given that power to have that control and to look at the moving parts, that's interesting. That's engaging. What's not engaging is just chuck it in, take it out, bang, there's my answer. So if that can be our focus, yeah, I think it's less of an issue, the whole cheating thing.
Yeah, and I do think there are going to be times when every kid cheats. Isn't there times when you've cheated? I have. I've cheated.
I'm sure I have. Yeah.
I have cheated. I have cheated on assessments in my life. And if anybody hasn't, then I'm quite willing to see your halo. Because there are going to be occasions where students will cheat. Maybe they're time poor, maybe they went out too late last night, whatever the situation is. That's the reality. But as you're talking about there, if they take pride in actually achieving something, the majority of students will not cheat. And if you're having open discussions with them, you're not threatening them, you're saying, look, this is what I want you to get from this, then the majority of students, if they value the process, will do that. Okay, if we're talking certain situations and certain environments where the learning's not valued, no interest in school, disengagement, those kinds of things, then you're dealing with a different question, aren't you? Rather than a question about your assessment and whether kids value learning. That's about whether they actually value schooling, isn't it? Yeah. And that's a different question altogether. So, yeah, I think we've got to have those open and honest kind of conversations, which you talked about agency before. That's exactly what that's about. The majority of kids you talk to about this go, why would I want to just have it give me the output? What, I don't learn anything from that. That's the majority of conversations I have. As I talked about my youngest daughter using Perplexity, she prefers to use that rather than ChatGPT because it gives her a short answer and it doesn't do the whole work for her. She understands, I think she understands most of the time.
How old is she?
When she goes, she's 13. She's 13. My eldest one is 15. She chooses not to use the technology at all, but she's confident in what she does. She just chooses not to. There may come a time when she does. I'll give you another example we're using in school. We've got year 12s doing textiles courses using image generators they'll do sketches. The sketches can then be put into Scribble Diffusion, which will create the image out of the sketches. And Adobe's Firefly, when that comes on board, that will do that as well at a more sophisticated level. So you sketch it out on paper, scan it in, or you can do it on an iPad, and then it will create the image for you based on your sketch. But they're then using image generators such as Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, that kind of thing to look at different ideas of, putting one fashion designer's work with another and mashing it up and see what they get out, So a skirt designed with, I don't know, with this Calvin Klein design compared with this kind of thing, and coming up with ideas. So they're using it for concepts. And then they're going and then reflecting on those concepts, and then they're going forward and doing their work based on what they found out. So in the investigation process, in the designs, they're using it, and they're also doing that in design and tech as well.
Okay. So just as we wind up, what would be your 1 or 2 tips for a teacher who hasn't done much with AI yet? They've maybe played around with it, they're sort of late to the game and they're freaking out a little. So they're not at a Scotch school, for example, but they need to do something. What would be your 1, 2, 3 bullet points? Like, just do this first. And
if you've got to the point where you know how to access ChatGPT or something like that, or Bing or whatever, and you can get it to do something, if you've got past that stage, which is, basically 101, isn't it? Then I would just copy an assessment task that you've created, just copy the whole thing, the whole text, paste it in, and just go and see what happens. And then have a look at the output that's given, and then go, okay, what grade would I give that? Right. If it's, a low grade, next step is to go, okay, if a student had done this and then they looked at that and went, that's not very good, but with some adjustments, it could be pretty good. Okay, that's your next stage. So then you've got to think about, okay, so how am I going to make that assessment not as easy to plagiarize? As simple as that.
And
because then it needs
is step 2 to do the same thing with a class?
Why not? Yeah. Have them do that. That's exactly what I just did with a group of students. I got them to plagiarize, as I said, year 7 doing a year 12 assessment. Yeah, and seeing how easy it is.
Last point, what's the response from students, like at Scotch? Are they like, wow, this is amazing? Or are they like really curious? Are they into it? Is it mixed? Are some enthusiasts and others?
Very mixed. It's a slow burner, actually, Richard. It's really interesting to see it with students. It's actually, teachers have been more fascinated than students. But that's I see that beginning to change now. Suddenly the conversation here is suddenly, I'm passing kids in the yard who are talking about it, and you suddenly see more interest. So I think my view on that is, because it was not in an app format, and because it didn't have a TikTok video at the beginning, then, it probably wasn't as interesting as But we're starting to see more and more use of it.
Okay, so let's wind it up. The hour is definitely up. Thanks everyone for tuning in. There will be a timestamp replay within a couple of days. If you are subscribed to my newsletter, you'll get it anyway. But I'll certainly put that out to the other people. There's quite a few people who requested that. Officially, this is closed. Thanks again for attending. I have got a few other people lined up for other sessions, and I might have one with Nick where we're talking about other aspects. So thanks again, and see you, Marshall, and see you, Chris.
Marshall, you can go to sleep now.
Yeah.